Before I get into what makes you attractive online, let's just get into what makes you attractive as a man in general. That is, what are attractive qualities in a man from a woman's perspective? Not only what they are, but why they exist as attractive qualities. Because online dating is just dating taken online. It's not like it's some like new magic formula and none of the same rules apply. It's all the same things that would have attracted her to you in person, but you just have different ways of conveying it. Instead of having your body language, your eye contact, those sorts of things, you have your profile, your messages, etc. The same concepts are important though. And the theory I'm going to use to explain all this is a theory called evolutionary psychology. The premise of that theory is that what we are attracted to are the things that would have helped us to pass our genes along throughout human history. And most of human history occurred before there was a society, before there was even farming, before there were cities. It's very much what would have occurred when we were just one step above the apes in terms of evolution. And it's kind of funny because a lot of the things that would have helped us survive then actually hurt us nowadays. And that's what really, I think, messes with a lot of people, is that they think that in order to get a girl to like them, they should be the best option for the woman in the 21st century. That's not the case. What you actually should be is the best option for the woman about 10,000 years ago. All right, and that's where a lot of disconnect comes, and that's where a lot of guys get really bad ideas about what attracts a woman. For example, nowadays guys think that if I get a good job and make a lot of money, that's a positive thing in the 21st century. However, 10,000 years ago, there was no such thing as money. There were other forms of capital, i.e. ability to hunt, i.e. meat to trade, i.e. Position or status within the tribe, meaning that you could get favors from other people, have allies, that kind of stuff. Those were all forms of value. So value existed, but money as a construct didn't. So money doesn't directly affect women's emotion nowadays. However, it can buy things or create other things that are of value and then do have an emotional impact with her. So a lot of times I'm going to ask you to think back to that environment and think back to what a woman would have responded to in that context. And what would have a woman responded to in that context? Let's look at what that context was. That context would be a very brutal existence where life expectancy is, infant mortality is rampantly high. Most children probably die before the age of 2. Most people in general probably die before the age of 20. So it's very much a situation of survival and replication, survival being paramount. So what does a woman want? A woman wants 2 things from a man. She wants, number 1, genetics good enough to have a strong, healthy baby who will not get sick and die early in life. Secondly, she wants a man who will stick around at least enough and help raise the baby enough that the baby doesn't die between years like 2 and I guess whenever it becomes sort of mannish in the tribe, maybe like 12, 13. So that's what she's looking for, is what we call value, which is being an evolutionary genetic good decision. And then the other is comfort, which is showing some form of trust, showing some form of commitment and dedication, which makes her feel like there's a reason that you would give your gifts to her and help her raise a child. Those are 2 very important characteristics. So that's what she's looking for. And again, what she's going to respond to are the emotional indicators of that. So it's not the logical things like money. It's the emotional things like status within the tribe. Okay? So when we get to writing an online profile, we're not going to try and brag about logical things. We're not going to say, I own a Ferrari, I make this amount of money, I went to this school, etc., etc. Those are all nice things in a way once a girl gets to meet you, because she can use those to brag to her friends or to justify why she likes you. So those are all great after the fact, but they're not the reasons a girl will get attracted to you in the first place. The other important thing to realize, besides the evolutionary psychology thing, is the idea psychologically that people are being bombarded with lots of different stimulus. And so we can't respond to all the elements of a situation. For example, if you were to just take a second, do a little experiment. Close your eyes right now, and I want you to imagine all the things that are in your room. And I want you to think about the color of things, what's around you, what the texture of the wall is, what sort of scraps and this and that are laying around you, what noises are going on that you may not have noticed before. Become aware of those. Become aware of anything you may not have smelled before. Be aware of the feeling of the rug under your feet, the feeling of maybe your hands on the table, your clothes on your body. All these things you might not have noticed before. Now go ahead and open your eyes. I'm guessing in just doing that briefly, there were a lot of things that you weren't aware of. Sounds, smells, sights, feelings, etc. Now, you're taking all that information in from moment to moment to moment, but if you had to deal with all that, you would literally go insane. So you don't deal with all the information that's being presented to you. What you actually do is you take a very thin slice of that information and you make assumptions based on that. Your conscious mind is only dealing with a tiny little percentage of the relevant information. And what you're trying to do is exactly that. You're trying to decide what's relevant. And so we're cueing off certain things. We're cueing off certain behaviors, of certain patterns of what types of people get what sorts of things. Okay, so for example, if you walk into a situation and you act confidently, a lot of times people don't know your credentials, they don't know who you are, but the fact that you're standing up straight and tall, you're looking them straight in the eye, you're talking in a nice loud tone of voice, they will trust you, they will believe you. Whereas if you went in and you were kind of like, not taking up a lot of space, like seemed to like hesitate with your words, you could actually have great credentials, they don't know, but they wouldn't believe you. It's like imagine that you have to take directions to somewhere and one person seems very sure of themselves, the other person doesn't. You're going to go with the person that seems sure of themselves, even if the other person is right. Okay? So you're not queuing off of the actual total information, you're queuing off of little factors. This is very important for attraction in general because in meeting someone new, you can literally be anyone you want to be. All right, you are not shackled by your past history. You're not shackled by what happened to you when you were 5 years old in grade school. You're not shackled by whether you got cut from the soccer team or whether the first girl that you liked, poured a glass of water on your head. Or you're not shackled by any of that stuff. You can literally be a new person just by acting like the person you want to be. This is a major premise to cold approach pickup, which is something I teach. It's also a huge premise to online game. In your profile, you can be anyone you want to be. Now, you want to be careful with that because you don't want to be so outlandishly different than who you are in person that when she gets to meet you on the date, she's just like, you lied to me, what the fuck? But there are a lot of things that are open for interpretation. There's a lot of things that are a matter of perspective. And there's a lot of things that even if you haven't been them in the past, you can be them now. And those things you want to convey in a positive way. Okay? So what are the characteristics in a real world example of an attractive man? Well, here's a couple. Confidence is huge, right? If you are confident, if when you say something, you say it with a determination that it's right, what does that convey about you as a person? It conveys that when you've said things confidently before, people have responded well to them. Because if people hadn't responded well to them, if when you say something confidently, someone beats you up for it, you'll stop saying things confidently pretty quickly. So you being able to say things with confidence implies that you've had a lot of friends, implies that people have responded well to you, implies that you've been in positions of status and power. Which again, in that caveman environment, positions of status and power within the tribe means access to food, access to sex, access to like tools and resources, all kinds of things that girl wants her child to have access to. Okay? So in that one little bit of being confident, you're conveying all these characteristics that would have helped a girl or helped a girl's child survive back in the day. All right? Another one is not flinching. Okay? If someone were to question you on something and you flinch or you back down very quickly, that conveys that you're dishonest. It conveys lack of confidence. It conveys that you're highly reactive to the situation. That situation matters a great deal to you, meaning that you don't have an abundance of good things in your life. Okay, so you don't want to be flinching or backing down. Another thing is if you're too polite. This is a really ironic, interesting one because in today's society, there's not a lot of fistfights. There's not a lot of people killing each other. We're in a relatively lawful society. And we're in a society that is largely polite. We say our pleases, we say our thank yous, we mind social courtesy because to a certain extent, we can be ostracized if we don't. And that works on a day-to-day level. However, in the tribal environment, here's another thing to realize. In the tribal environment, 20% of the men were sleeping with 80% of the women. And that's probably an under-exaggeration. It's probably more like 1% of the men are sleeping with 80% of the women in a tribal environment. The chief is sleeping with fucking everybody. A lot of guys in the tribe died virgins. That's kind of how it would really work. All right. Now, if you're the chief, you don't have to be polite because if you're impolite and someone gets impolite back, you have his head cut off. If you're a little man in the tribe, like a guy who doesn't have a lot of status, you do have to be polite because otherwise, end of your life. So in a weird way, being polite is conveying to the world that you're not the chief. Okay, now I'm not telling you to always be a dick in life. I'm not telling you to go tell your boss to go fuck himself. But what I am telling you is when you're dating girls, and especially when you're meeting girls, being too polite, being too willing to give in, being too willing to be nice, you think that it's like giving the girl an experience and being nice and being gentlemanly and it's going to make her like you. In fact, what it's going to do is it's going to make her think you're boring and turn you off, and it's going to convince her that you are not the chief, because the chief never had to learn to be polite, and so he's not polite. Our natural instinct is not to be polite. If you ever watch children, you'll notice they're incredibly rude, mean, cruel to each other. That's sort of our natural instinct. And ironically, the attractive quality is to act a little bit more like them, a little bit more like that rude child who hasn't been punished enough in life yet. Because again, if you haven't been punished, it means that you must have had a lot of social alliances, you must have had status, you must have had power, you must have had people react well to you in the past. Okay, so these are all characteristics that we're going to try and convey in our online profiles. We're going to try to hit girls on an emotional level. We're going to try to appeal to the things that would have appealed to them in that evolutionary environment, not the things that make sense in the 21st century. And we're going to try to not be afraid to get a reaction, not be afraid to be polarizing, because in that small tribal environment, if you got kicked out of the tribe, that was death. And so there's a natural inclination in our evolution to sort of play things safer than we should, right? Nowadays, we live in a tribe of 7 billion people. So the huge advantage that we have is we have the advantage of being able to fail regularly and have it not hurt us. Imagine if you had 10,000 people who hate you a little bit and 100 people who will do anything and everything possible to make your life a success. You would probably be one of the most successful people on the planet, because the 10,000 people that hate you a little bit won't put a lot of time and effort into you. The 100 that are willing to work for you, that's an incredible resource. So what you want is not a lot of people a little bit into you. You want a few people so into you they'll do anything for you. That's what we're going for with this online stuff. That's why I'm going to encourage you over and over again to do what I call being polarizing, being a little rude, being a little out there. Know that you need to do that to get people's attention, and also know that from this evolutionary environment standpoint, being rude, being willing to be rude, being willing to offend actually does convey value and actually does make you a sex-worthy man, okay? So these are some of the characteristics that we're going to be looking at and we're going to be utilizing. Because that environment of 10,000 years ago is a little hard to picture, you weren't alive then, I'm going to give you a metaphor for a time you were alive that's very helpful and very similar, and that is the metaphor of high school. Now, high school is very interesting and very similar to the evolutionary environment in a way, because it's a situation where a lot of rules are being developed and a lot of rules are being established and then broken. And it's also the time when we're all going through puberty, and for the first time in our lives, we're sexual creatures. So this whole idea of sexual competition is just starting out. So it's a very pure form of sexual competition. And so in a way, you could look at like the high school bully as sort of like the chief of the tribe who chop off your head if you get out of line, that sort of thing. And there's one sort of interaction I want you to think about in that high school context that's a very useful metaphor for all of these sort of like attractive qualities and how to convey them. And I want you to think about the popular jock, who's maybe not necessarily the most intelligent guy, interacting with the nerdy kid that doesn't have a lot of friends. And I want you to imagine the nerdy kid is going to try and go make friends with that popular jock. Now, first of all, think to yourself, why is the nerdy kid going to go try and make friends with him? Well, it's probably because the nerdy kid doesn't have a whole lot of friends, and the popular kid, by definition, does have a lot of friends. And so in this interaction, the nerdy kid is coming from a place of scarcity, a place of every friend he has means a lot to him, and he really cares and wants new ones. The popular kid has a lot of friends, doesn't need more, and if it doesn't go well, it's not the biggest deal in the world for him. So the incentives are much stronger on one side than the other. And the fact that the one person, the nerdy kid in this case, needs the interaction more than the other, it's going to put him in a position of lower value, a position of trying more hard, a position of neediness, desperation, and that's going to come off as unattractive. Also, he's going to be thinking very hard about everything. He's going to be thinking like, did I say the right thing? How's he perceiving me? Are other people watching? How's this looking? That sort of thing. Because again, he cares so much about the outcome. The popular kid who has lots of friends, in all likelihood, has enough friends, doesn't even want this kid as a friend, doesn't need him, has enough already. So he'll be dismissive, may not care, certainly will not be overthinking things. He'll just say whatever comes to his mind, won't be trying too hard, all right? And that's what the attractive quality is. You know how like people give you the advice, just be yourself? To a certain extent, that's good advice. Just be yourself. Don't be overthinking things. Don't be trying too hard. Now, if just be yourself means be shy and don't talk to girls, or it means Don't like make the most of your life and sit on the couch and eat potato chips. Don't just be yourself in that regard. But do just be yourself in the sense of being comfortable with yourself, not caring too much about the outcome of any particular situation, and just allowing yourself to relax and chill and be at your best. Because again, if you're in your head too much, you're trying to figure it out, you're trying to be too perfect, the very act of trying to be too perfect, even if you do the right thing, is going to make it an awful showing. Okay, so a lot of conveying positive qualities has to do with not trying hard. And so what we're going to try and teach you to do when we have you write online profiles and write online messages is we're going to teach you how to convey these attractive qualities of being ambitious, having a lot of things going for you, having social connections, that kind of stuff. But we're also going to try and have you convey them in a way that is not trying hard. It doesn't appear as though you're trying to brag. It's like any good qualities about you that come out, they happened almost by accident. Okay, so we're not going to be trying hard. And then we're also going to take the role of being a little dismissive. In every situation, there's one person reacting more to the other person than the other person's reacting to them. In general, the person who's reacting more is of lower value. Again, the nerdy guy's reacting more to the popular jock, so lower value. Secondly, in every interaction, one person is the seller, trying to sell themselves, sell an idea. The other person is buying, is the decision maker. And typically, women are the decision makers. Women are the buyers and men are the sellers in typical courtship in the modern day, in the modern era. But the chief of a tribe would have been the buyer. The chief of a tribe would have been the person that has all the resources and would have been able to provide a lot to many of the girls in the tribe, if not all of the girls in the tribe. So he would be in the role of buyer. He would be in the role of, I can provide for your children, now I will choose my wives from among you. And you want to be adopting that role of buyer rather than seller. So every time that you're in the role of selling yourself, i.e. trying to convince a girl of your resume, trying to convince a girl how cool you are, trying to convince a girl you're funny or that your mother loves you or whatever else, you're selling. And when you're selling, you can't be buying. Okay, so instead we want to unsell. If anything, we want to be dismissive, push away, even challenge the girl in the way that we write our profile and we put together our messages. You'll see a lot more about that when we get into the technical details, but I want you to have these attitudes and these metaphors of, again, 10,000 years ago, the idea of you're trying to provide in that evolutionary environment, trying to provide the proper genes, the high value, the resources for the kid, but at the same time, the willingness. And then also remember that metaphor of high school. Remember the metaphor of the popular kid versus the kind of nerdy, dorky kid and how that interaction breaks down. Because that's all going to be very central to the way that we're going to construct our online profiles and the way that we're going to try and convey ourselves in that medium.